going on, everybody? Episode 2 after the whistle of this college football season. 2024, week 1, already produced some really good football games. It produced some duds, and it showed us some surprise teams, some teams that are exactly who we thought they were. We're going to get into all that here in just a second. First, I want to say shout out to the Florida State football fans that messaged me last week about the episode and said that there is no culture problem in Tallahassee. I would like to say, do you want to delete the messages you sent me? Or do you want to take it back? Because I believe there is. And here's why I say that. And after the game against Boston College, it's becoming more and more prevalent to me that I think Mike Norvell, the hype train, might have been a little bit too... A lot of people might have jumped on the Mike Norvell hype train a little too soon last year. We'll get into this and the Seminoles' embarrassing showing last night. We'll get into that a little bit more later on the show. But I will say, everyone that sent me messages that said that I was ridiculous or that what I was saying was stupid. I mean, I had people on Twitter saying that I had no absolute idea what I was talking about. Florida State didn't have a culture problem. If you want to rescind your statement, I will allow you to do so. So moving forward, week 1. I'm going to start things off here with my contenders and pretenders. So we found out, Florida State pretender. We knew that last week after we watched Georgia Tech. So I'm going to move on from there. I don't want this to be a bash Florida State episode. I really don't, even though it could very well be, but I don't want it to be a bash Florida State episode. So moving on, contenders. Georgia, 100,000,000%. Georgia is a contender in the college football playoff. It is they left absolutely no doubt Saturday against Clemson. Clemson, mind you, a very good football team. Still a good football team, regardless of what you think about the fact that Dabo refuses to, I guess, morph or adjust or adapt to the ever-changing landscape that is college football. Like, he just refuses to do so. He doesn't get players out of the transfer portal. He he still recruits at a decently high level. I mean, he's not bringing in the Clemson recruiting classes that he was bringing in when he was beating Alabama in the national championship and when he had guys like Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence and, Sammy Watkins and Justin Ross. I mean, you can go through and name off, team after team after team that Dabo had recruited that was a very, very good football team, a lot of talent. However, the ever-changing landscape in college football nowadays is just that. It is ever-changing. And you see every year the unwillingness of a lot of coaches to adapt to the new way of doing things via, but getting players out of the portal, filling in holes in your roster via the transfer portal. You can recruit your base and you can recruit your foundation. But then you have players that go early to the draft, or maybe you have players leave, or you have players graduate, or whatever else. A lot of teams have done and filled in those key roster slots to perfection over the couple years that we've had the transfer portal and pretty much immediate eligibility for all these players that are transfers. So when you look at teams like this and you look at a Clemson that used to be a national powerhouse, just a team that for all intents and purposes was a dynasty, was very hard to stop, very, very good offenses led by the likes of Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. And then you had very good defenses. Granted, the guy that used to coach your defense is gone in Brent Venables, but this is still a team that recruits that front seven very well. Honestly, going into that football game, going into Clemson, Georgia, I I had 31-16 Georgia was my prediction. I felt like we were going to see a little bit better offensive showing out of the Tigers. I felt like it was going to take, this being Georgia's first game of the year, a lot of new faces on defense. I felt like that we were going to have a couple moments where Clemson would score, but I did not think they would ever make it really close. Now, I kind of had an idea that this game would be close for a half, and that Clemson would play with a lot of emotion early, but then we would get to a point where Georgia's depth and just overall, Georgia just has the better roster. That is not a point to be argued, regardless of what Dabo Swinney said in his press conference about, he likes the way that their players match up with Georgia's players. That's a ridiculous statement. Georgia's got completely, just the complete top to bottom better roster than Clemson. However, when you look at how Georgia dominated this football game and how they were able to absolutely smother the run game in Phil Maffa, who was not even able to really get going, and then you look at the confusion that they caused for Cade Klubnik, that was typical Georgia defense. I saw it, 4 quarters. That is a Kirby Smart coach defense. They are going to smother you to where they make you one-dimensional, and then when they make you one-dimensional and you can't run the football, then you let your playmakers like Malachi Starks and guys on the back end just absolutely take over the football game. There's no windows to throw the football. I think Cade Klubnik had if I can remember right, he had 2 or 3 throws that I was like, okay, that looks good. I mean, he had one deep shot down the left side of the field that I thought, that was a pretty good throw. I mean, there was really, we were in great coverage. It just, it was just a good throw. You saw a flash there of potentially what Cade Klubnik could be. But he has not lived up to the hype that we have heard for the last couple years that he should be. Obviously, when a player of the caliber of Trevor Lawrence leaves and then you get DJU coming in, who we will talk about later, trust me. When you get a player like him come in, it's almost like Clemson fans and football fans in general love to look at a Clemson quarterback and compare to Deshaun Watson, compare to Trevor Lawrence. To me, DJU compares in no way to those two guys, and neither does Cade Klubnik. From a talent perspective, there's absolutely no way that those guys come even close to being as good as those two guys. So when there's a defensive performance like Georgia, obviously, I had 31-16, turned out to be 34-3. Just a smothering performance from Georgia. If you don't think that's the best team in college football, then obviously you're blind, or you're just you don't know ball very well. That is the clear-cut best team in college football. Like, the rankings right there, number 1 in the country, no doubter. It's almost like when a major league hitter hits a home run and you don't even have to look at it. It's a no-doubter. Watching Georgia play on Saturday, that was a no-doubter. That's a no-doubter that's the best team in college football. I mean, you look at 447 total yards to Clemson's 188, 278 passing yards to 142, 169 rushing yards to 46. That, to me, is the difference in the football game. 27 rushing attempts for Georgia for an average yard per rush of 6.3 yards. Clemson had 46 yards on 23 attempts, 2 yards a rush. And then also Georgia held the ball I think Georgia had about 6 or 7 more minutes of time of possession than Clemson did. Clemson was just never really given the opportunity to get going. Like I said, the Georgia defense is just very smothering, and, they're just not going to give you an opportunity to get in a rhythm, especially the way that they played Clemson on Saturday. So, that's to me, when we talk about contenders and pretenders, that's one of my contenders is Georgia, 100%. The 3:30 slot actually produced a game, and I've got a bone to pick with you Florida fans, because 3 years ago, Florida fans and boosters, you name it, ran a coach out of town that won 30 games in 3 seasons, went to an SEC title game, and played in 3 New Year's Six bowls. You ran him out of town because, one, he wasn't winning enough. That's what I heard. And the knack on the recruiting thing, I can understand that to a certain aspect. Dan Mullen was still, to me, head and shoulders a better football coach than Billy Napier is. To rush and to fire a guy like Dan Mullen, who was very successful in the 3 years that he was there. No, he didn't win a national championship. No, he didn't win an SEC championship, but he played for one. Billy Napier hasn't even sniffed one. And you give this guy the opportunity of a lifetime at a top 10, 15 job in the country, which I agree that Florida is. I believe that Florida is a top 10 or 15 job in the country. When you look at the states you get to recruit out of primarily in Florida, the money that you get, the level of football players that you get, I mean, it's definitely, I would feel like it's a top 10 job in the country. And you get a guy that's not proven in this conference, in the Southeastern Conference. You get a guy from the Sun Belt that is not proven. He's only been an assistant at the SEC level. You bring him in. It's basically an experiment. And then now we're back where you started 3 years ago. And you got a coach that's not winning. You're not seeing any improvement whatsoever in the teams from year to year. You know, if I was a Florida fan, which by the grace of God, I am not, but I will say, if I was a Florida fan and I saw Billy Napier's first season, and then I saw an improvement in his second season, and then I saw an improvement in his third season, I would not rush to be, let's get rid of this guy. However, from the moment he stepped off the plane in Gainesville to now, there has absolutely been no visible improvement in the Florida Gators program. As a Georgia fan, I love it. As a football fan, it is absolutely preposterous that Florida fans will continue to defend the firing of a guy who won 30 freaking games in 3 years, went to an SEC championship, played in 3 New Year's Six bowls, and you fired him because he wasn't too crazy about recruiting. And he made a couple comments about recruiting, how he didn't recruit during football season. He worried about that after the season. I understand those statements that Dan Mullen made weren't exactly fan friendly. However, the guy was winning football games. He wasn't winning SEC title, like I said. He wasn't winning national championship, like I said, but he was winning football games. Double-digit wins in 3 years. And that wasn't enough. We got to let this guy go. Get him out of here. And let's go get a guy from the Sun Belt who's never coached in our league as a head coach. The delusion out of Gainesville for that is ridiculous. So, suffer all you want. You did it to yourselves. And you got your teeth kicked in Saturday by an in-state school that you call a rival. Probably lost some recruits over it. And you saw, for the first time in a long time, there is a talent gap between Miami and Florida, a very visible talent gap. Miami honestly looked like a Power 4 school playing an FCS school in Gainesville Saturday. Florida was outmatched. They were taking horrible angles on defense. They were allowing Cam Ward to have an infinite amount of time in the pocket. He did whatever he wanted to do. Now, he's a great player, don't get me wrong, and he might be one of, if not the best quarterback in the country. But Florida, I felt like, and I was very wrong about my prediction for this football game, but I felt like Florida had a little bit of a chance. They had to play an ugly football game. They had to make it ugly. They had to pressure Cam Ward. They had to hit him. They had to knock him on his back. They had to be good up front on both sides of the football. They had to run and keep the ball away from that Miami offense. I felt like Florida had a chance if they made the game ugly. And I actually picked them to win. I will not make that mistake again the rest of the football season. I don't care who they're playing. I will not make that mistake again in my pick'em group. I will not put any more money on betting lines for Florida, because that showing showed me all I need to know for the rest of the year, that you're going to get minimum effort out of this squad in Gainesville. You're going to get minimum effort out of Billy Napier. Say what you want. If you're a Florida fan, come at me. I don't care. I got bullets in the chamber. Let's go. But Billy Napier was not the right hire, and it was not right to fire Dan Mullen. I don't like Dan Mullen, but there's not a Florida fan out there with a brain that wouldn't do a trade right now if it was possible to trade Napier for Mullen and bring him back. I mean, just listen to this. Is this characteristic of Florida football? 34 minutes of time of possession to 25 and some change. Didn't really run the football very well. I mean, actually, you ran the football per yard better than Miami, but the problem is Florida has produced some elite defensive backs. You've sent some very good talent to the NFL at that defensive back position by way of corner, whether it be corners or safeties. Cam Ward looked like he was playing a backyard football match on Thanksgiving. He did whatever he wanted. 3-step drop, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. Sidearm it over here, throw it over the top over here, dance around. I mean, it was unreal watching him. I mean, we knew he was good. I honestly didn't know how he would respond in an environment like the Swamp, playing most of his career at schools outside of the SEC and then Washington State. He probably played in some decent environments with Washington State, but I was wondering how he would react to a place like the Swamp. And man, color me shocked. He looked great. Like I said, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Top 5 for sure. Could be top 3. But he looked unreal. So, for me, if I'm a Florida fan, if I'm one of you Florida fans out there, I'm looking at this and I am absolutely embarrassed at the way your football team could not convert on third down, could not keep drives going, and allowed Miami to just absolutely just railroad you at home. I don't understand it. You've got the state of Florida to recruit from. Florida, like I said earlier, is a top 10 job in the country. But that showing against a Miami team that's good. Are they a playoff contender? I think so. But should that game have been more competitive? Yes. Absolutely. And if I'm a Florida fan, Napier cannot leave Gainesville soon enough. So, Notre Dame, A&M. Man, this game put me to sleep twice. And I was watching it. We went to the lake with my family this weekend and for Labor Day and spent some time up there with my mom, my dad, and my wife, daughter, and brother-in-law, sister, and my nephew. And, we go up there every year as a family and up there on Lake St. Clair. And we watched football a lot this weekend. We watched almost every high-profile marquee game this weekend. And I tell you, this game right here put me to sleep twice. Once in the first half, once in the second half. Now, the jury's still out for me on, is Notre Dame that good? Is A&M that bad? Or just both of these defenses good and the offenses are I couldn't really figure this out. Because aside from the 2 A&M turnovers, the game from a statistical standpoint is not that far. 190 yards rushing to 150-ish, passing yards 150 to 100. A&M could not throw the football. Neither team was great on third down. Notre Dame's like 2 of 12. A&M was like 4 of 13. Neither team were great on third down. It was a 3-and-out fest. Constantly 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Like I said, I fell asleep twice. I woke up and was like, whoa, yeah, what happened? Yeah. So it's one of those games. I'm not too keen on saying that Notre Dame is a team of world beaters, but I will say that Notre Dame beating Texas A&M, their schedule is actually very favorable moving forward to potentially go undefeated. Earlier before the season started, you would look at Notre Dame's schedule and say they have to go to Kyle Field. That's a tough game. They play in Florida State. That would have been a tough game, we thought. And then Notre Dame to end the season, play in USC. Toss-up game somewhat. And after watching USC play, that's going to be a lot more competitive football game. But you're looking at 10-2 at worst. Now you're looking at 11-1 at worst, in my opinion, for Notre Dame. And they just have a very favorable schedule. And Marcus Freeman has done a very good job of instilling his culture and principles in that football team. They were very physical. It was one of the first times in recent memory that I have watched a Notre Dame football team and said that they were more physical on both sides of the football than an SEC opponent. That's always, to me, been Notre Dame's Achilles heel over the years. You can think about when they played Bama for the national championship back in 2012, Bama was completely the more physically dominant football team, and that has been a trend for Notre Dame for a while now. When they're very good, and then they run into an SEC team, and they look like they don't belong at all. That was not the case Saturday night. They were the more physical football team on both sides of the football. They pushed Notre Dame around, or they pushed A&M around up front. On both sides of the football, offense was knocking A&M off the ball. Defense was getting in the backfield. And you forced Connor Wegman to throw 2 picks. 2 throws that I feel like sailed on him a little bit. And Notre Dame, to me, better roster. Should have won the football game. I actually was wrong on this when I picked, A&M. We'll get into that a little later. I picked A&M to win this football game mainly because of the home field advantage that they had. Kyle Field, difficult place to play. A lot of screaming, crazy Aggie fans. But, man, was I wrong about that one. I thought be a little better, maybe without the 2 turnovers. Maybe it's a little different, but not the case. One of the most surprising games to me of the weekend was how low scoring USC and LSU were. Now, this was one of those games that I thought, and I would have lost everything if I would have bet the over on the points scored, because the total points scored was, I think the line was 69.5. I completely would have whiffed on that. Luckily, didn't. My prize picks actually did really well. If you getting into sports gambling, getting into, doing some stuff, I would recommend Prize Picks. Very easy platform to navigate. You go into the platform, you pick 2 bets, more or less, over, under, however you want to word it. You go in, it'll say so-and-so player, 0.5 touchdowns. You think they're going to score at least 1 touchdown, you click over, and then you pick another player. Like, for example, Shadur Sanders last week, they had him at 292.5 passing yards. I took the over. Obviously, he threw for over 400, won the over, won me a little money. Easy to navigate. Check it out. Download it on the App Store, Prize Picks. I've been enjoying, using their platform so far. If I was a DraftKings guy before, now I'm a Prize Picks guy, and love it so far. So back to LSU and USC. I was actually very impressed with how improved USC was on the defensive side of the football, because I thought this game was going to be an absolute track meet. I thought this game was going to be one of those, whoever has the ball last is going to win this football game. I was thinking somewhere along the lines of, I can't remember exactly what I said. Let me see. I pull up my predictions from last week. I got to keep notes, otherwise y'all will grill me. Y'all say, oh, you didn't say that. So I had 41-34 LSU. I trusted LSU's defense more than I trusted USC's defense, and I thought ultimately that was going to be the difference in the football game. I thought that LSU would make a key stop in the second half to get a little bit of separation, but that wasn't the case. Obviously, we saw the press conference of Brian Kelly after the football game, upset, visibly upset, and I will say this. Brian Kelly should be upset at the fact that, you've lost 3 straight week 1 openers, but upset more at the fact of how undisciplined this LSU football team was in that football game. There was a couple times where you had USC on the ropes. There was a couple times they had a long, 3rd and long situation, and you committed a dumb penalty to give USC a fresh set of downs. And it's an area of the game to me in college football that is not stated enough how important it is to play disciplined football. If LSU goes out, they play disciplined football, they more than likely win this football game. The problem was you didn't. You had a lot more, you had a lot more penalty yards. They had 100 penalty yards, I think. And you turned the ball over once. You're not going to beat a Lincoln Riley football team like that. Because Lincoln Riley, the offensive mastermind that he is, he's eventually going to score on you. You can't give him extra opportunities. When you have him on 3rd and long and you have them stopped, the last thing you need to do is commit a defensive holding or pass interference or something along those lines and give them a free first down, because you give them a free first down and they get points out of it. So they did it to themselves. It was surprisingly a low-scoring football game, 47 total points scored. I would have never guessed that. Never guessed that. Like I said, I thought it was going to be a track meet. Props to USC. They definitely looked improved on the defensive side of the football. They're going to get tested going forward. LSU, it remains to be seen how much of an offensive powerhouse LSU is. Regardless, they still gave up 421 yards and 300 through the air and over 100 rushing. So it's not like USC's defense was like worlds improved, and it's not like they were absolute just putting the clamps on LSU, but they looked better. They looked more physical, and they looked a little bit more disciplined, especially on the back end. And shout out to all the Garrett Nussmeier haters. I know they lost. I know they LSU lost the football game, but man, he looked great to me. I know a lot of LSU fans that were online saying that they weren't Nussmeier fans, and there were a lot of talking heads on, whether it be ESPN or wherever else. I heard a lot of people just not really crazy about Garrett Nussmeier. I don't understand it. He looked great. He looked poised. He made a couple mistakes. However, I thought the kid played well. I think he'll be great for him this year. I think he'll have a really good 2024 campaign. And what remains to be seen with LSU is that was not a typical LSU defensive performance. I hope that they can get back to the drawing board on that and learn from it. And I had someone ask me the other day if I thought LSU was still a playoff contender. I think that remains to be seen as well. I think it all comes down to the adjustments. What kind of adjustments do they make? Now, as far as their schedule goes, they don't really face another quality opponent until October 12th. They've got Ole Miss coming to town. The beauty of that is it's still don't really know when. I'm thinking that's going to be a night game. I don't think they've really announced it yet, but that'll probably be a night game in Death Valley. You got Ole Miss coming to town. That's your moment, looking ahead, to prove that you can be a playoff contender. And week 1, it was just a fact of USC took advantage of mistakes, and they were just a smidge better than you on week 1. And if USC keeps winning, then that statement can hold true. If you're an LSU fan, you can say, hey, we lost to one of the best teams in the country. I don't think USC is one of the best teams in the country. Are they a playoff contender? Yes. Are they a top 5 team? No. However, LSU, you're got a favorable schedule up until that Ole Miss game. You got Nichols, you got South Carolina, who looked horrible Saturday. You got UCLA, unranked, should be a win. It's at home. Then you got South Alabama the week after that, and then you got that Ole Miss game on October 12th, and a night game in Death Valley. That's your chance with the eyes of the nation on you to show everyone that you are a playoff contender and week 1 was just a fluke. So to answer the question, I don't know yet. Give me till October 13th, and I'll make up my mind if LSU's a playoff contender. So admitting where I was wrong, that's part of where I'm at. I'm not too proud to admit it, but I was horribly wrong on my Penn State West Virginia prediction. I predicted Penn State to win. I just thought it would be more of like a struggle win. They ended up winning by a lot larger margin than I predicted. I predicted them to win like 27-24. Ended up 34-12. They looked very much improved. Drew Aller, threw a couple balls that I was very impressed with. There was a couple throws he made that I was like, okay, that's the Drew Aller we've been told about for the last couple years. That's that guy. He looked great. Singleton is Singleton. Bruising running back. Could not be stopped. I think he had 114 yards. I think he averaged almost 10 yards a carry. It was ridiculous. But, Singleton's one of those guys now. Wallace, receiver, also for them, very good. Harrison Wallace, also a very good athlete. Definitely going to be Aller's favorite target this season. It looks like to me that Penn State is finally in a position, physicality-wise, playmaker-wise. If Drew Aller keeps playing at the level he's playing at, they look like a team that I feel like can make a little bit of noise in the Big Ten. I'm not 100% ready to commit to saying that they can beat Ohio State. After what I saw this past weekend, Penn State can definitely beat Michigan. Michigan's now it's probably going to be a slugfest type of game, but I feel like Penn State could definitely end up beating Michigan. Now, they don't play Michigan in the regular season, so that's kind of a favorable thing for them. They do have USC, they do have Ohio State, but also that's another thing about Penn State. They have a very favorable schedule minus those 2 games. You beat West Virginia, which is kind of like a lot of people viewed it as a trap game. You've got USC in LA, but then you have Ohio State at home. If you split those games, if you lose one and win the other, you finish the season 11-1. Penn State's right there in the midst of the playoff, and could be a very dangerous team as long as Aller keeps progressing and getting better. Singleton keeps running the ball like he is, and Harrison Wallace just keeps being an absolute freak on the outside. That's a team that could be. That's a team that could make some noise in the Big Ten, but definitely make some noise in the college football playoff at the end of the year. So I was wrong there. I picked Penn State to win, so I was right in picking them to win, but I was predicting, a lot closer football game. Where I was horribly wrong, I had Florida beating Miami in the Swamp, 24-23 was my score prediction. I had Florida coming in, making it a messy game, getting a lot of pressure on Cam Ward, playing good coverage on the back end, running the football effectively. However, it was not a game that really ever was in Florida's grasp. It was one of those games. I mean, it looked like maybe, we could have seen a slugfest early in that contest, but after Cam Ward, I don't even think he needed time to settle in. They scored 17 points in that second quarter, and it was like bam, bam, bam. Next thing you know, it's 24-3, 24-10, and you're just like, oh man, this is bad. And then they come out, in the second half, and they score another 14 in the third quarter, and it's out of reach by that point. But I didn't think that when it was 7-3 in the first quarter, you kind of felt like it was one play away from Florida building some momentum and being able to swing the momentum in their direction and be able to attack Miami and maybe get something going. Didn't happen, unfortunately. Second quarter, Miami on the second quarter, Miami on the third quarter, and by then the game was over. And, finished 41-17, which was well off of my score prediction of 24-23. Like I said, I will not be picking Florida in any spread matchups for the rest of the football season. And unless they're playing an FCS opponent, I'm not picking them outright either, because that was an absolutely embarrassing showing from Florida. Also was horribly wrong on the Notre Dame Texas A&M prediction. I had 23-20 A&M. I thought the difference was Kyle Field. I thought that they were going to be really good up front and match up with Notre Dame well. I thought it was going to be a slugfest of a football game. Like I said, 23-20. My score prediction wasn't far off because it ended up being 23-13, but I felt like it was going to swing in A&M's favor due to the home field advantage. That's not what happened. Like I said, Marcus Freeman's squad really impressed me. Like I said, it's the first time I've watched a Notre Dame team in the last, 10, 15 years where I've said that team was more physical than the SEC opponent they were lined up across from. So that was a big thing from them. Also, man, I was wrong a lot last weekend. Y'all just go ahead and quit listening to me. Don't listen to me when you're throwing your money down and placing your bets. Don't listen to me. But man, the USC LSU prediction was wrong too. I honestly had 41-34 LSU. Like I said, I thought LSU's defense was going to be the difference in this football game. 75 total points scored is what I had predicted. I would have hammered the over if I bet the over of, I believe, like I said, it was 69.5 points. Unfortunately, it was not a typical USC offensive output with 27 points. That's about half of what they normally put out. So terrible, terrible, terrible weekend for my college pick'em. I'm a member of a college pick'em group with some friends of mine. It was a terrible weekend for that. We don't want to talk about that. And we don't want to talk about the picks that I made. Looking forward to this weekend, we got a few marquee matchups, and we got a matchup that really intrigues me as far as a point spread goes. Obviously, there's not a lot of big ranked-on-ranked matchups this weekend. A lot of the teams that played ranked opponents last weekend are playing, FCS schools like Georgia is this weekend with Tennessee Tech. However, week 2 is going to produce a really good football game, I believe, in Ann Arbor. After what I saw this past weekend with Michigan and Fresno State, I think Texas is going to obliterate them. And hear me out. But I think that Michigan lost way too much from last year's football team. Now, I still think they're a physical football team. I don't think that they're just going to roll over, lay down, and die against a team like Texas. I just think that Texas has better athletes on both sides of the football, and I feel like that Texas is going to roll over Michigan. After the offensive output that I saw from Texas this past weekend against Colorado State, who is not a pushover football team by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, you're not talking about Colorado State is not a Arkansas Pine Bluff or a Furman or somebody like that. Colorado State has had some teams in the past that are pretty competitive with these heavier hitters. But for Texas to do what Texas did to Colorado State and then to watch Michigan and Fresno State, I just am not sold that the Wolverines can produce and have the production that they had last year out of the backfield by way of running the football. I don't feel like they're as physical up front. They lost some guys to the NFL there as well. The defense still looks pretty good. Top 10 defense in the country. However, if there's anyone that I trust to exploit a defense and get vertical on a defense like Michigan, it is Steve Sarkisian and his staff and Quinn Ewers, who, by the way, that no-look pass was filthy by Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers definitely top 5, top 3 quarterback in the country. And I'm looking forward to seeing him, go up to the big house, hostile environment, go to Ann Arbor and play that Michigan football team. We're going to learn a lot about Texas this Saturday, and we're going to learn a lot about Michigan. I have Texas winning this football game 31-13. I don't think this is going to be a football game that's close. I think it will be close actually early. Same thing I said about Georgia-Clemson. I feel like this game might be close early due to the emotions in the game, big matchup in Ann Arbor. But I ultimately feel like Texas will pull away in the second half, and the athletes on Texas's offense will outmatch the athletes on Michigan's defense, primarily on the outside. And but that's arguably the biggest game of the weekend. Like I said, we have a lot of ranked versus unranked matchups, and then that's your ranked on ranked premier matchup of the weekend. However, I will say there's 3 matchups that I'm looking at that I will say intrigue me the most. I'm going to call these my sleeper games. Arkansas at Oklahoma State is a very interesting game to me. Seeing how Arkansas played last weekend, and then also with the way that Oklahoma State runs the football, with Ollie Gordon, I'm anxious to see, what this Arkansas team can do with Petrino calling the plays now, with Taylon Green and Jaquindon Jackson. I'm really curious about this football game. Looking at it on paper, it should be one of those games that has the makings for a shootout. High scoring. It's in Stillwater. I don't know if I'm going to make a prediction on this one. Oklahoma State current line is 7.5 points. Oklahoma State's way. I feel like I would take the under on that one. I feel like it's going to be a shootout. I feel like it's going to be a 3-point win for whichever team wins it. I feel like it's going to be like a 3-4-point win. I think the difference in this football game is going to come down to one thing, and that goes for both sides. It goes for Oklahoma State and it goes for Arkansas. Who runs the football more effectively? Does Oklahoma State with Ollie Gordon run the football more effectively than Arkansas with Jaquindon Jackson, or vice versa? I feel like whichever team runs the football better is going to win this football game, because they will be able to control the clock and they will be able to, slow the game down and play at their pace. So that, to me, is where my head's at on that. Now, if I'm forced to make a prediction, I will say I'm going to take Arkansas, and I'm going to say 36-34 Arkansas on that one. I feel like this has got the makings for, like I said, a track meet, shootout, 2, very good running backs. I feel like that's going to be the focal point of this football game. Another game I wouldn't say really is a sleeper game to me. I feel like Tennessee is worlds better than NC State, especially after what we saw this past weekend. But that's another game. Tennessee going on the road. We're going to find out more about Nico and that offense. I'm just go ahead and say something. I see a lot of people, over the last couple of days getting really high on these teams that scored 60-plus points on Saturday. Ole Miss, Tennessee. Those teams, yeah, they generated a lot of points, but you got to look at who they're playing. I'm not one to jump on the hype train after a week 1 win over an FCS opponent. I'm just not. You're playing inferior athletes. Your receivers are lined up with guys that are nowhere near the same caliber athlete they are. Your quarterback is throwing to those receivers. It's just, to me, I'm not one to really jump into the hype pool or jump on the hype train, after a week 1 win against, teams like Furman, Arkansas Pine Bluff, these teams like that. I'm not one to jump on the hype train. Now we get to see what Tennessee can be and what they're made out of. When they go to NC State, we will get to see exactly what Tennessee's made out of. If they go in there, which I think they will, and they beat NC State by 20 or more points, then you can really say that Josh Heupel and Nico have this program in a position to make a playoff push. NC State, obviously no slouch of an opponent, so that's why I'm saying that this will be the tell for Tennessee on if they're going to be who a lot of people think they could be, which is a playoff team this year. This will be the first order of business for Tennessee to prove that, so to speak. Now, my sleeper game. This is a very interesting matchup because I think that I don't believe in any way, shape, or form Boise State has a chance to beat Oregon. I don't think that. What I will say is Ashton Jeanty, if they get the run established early against Oregon, and you can keep Oregon off the field, I'm saying it makes this game interesting. I'm not saying that Boise State could go out here and beat Oregon. Oregon's favored currently by 19 points. But I will say it can make this game somewhat interesting. You know, arguably the best running back in college football. If they're able to establish the run, then maybe we see maybe Oregon has a scare, especially after how we saw them play against Idaho. Boise State, to me, they're better than Idaho. They're a better football team. So, who's to say that they couldn't give Oregon a scare? We'll see. But that to me is my game that I'm intrigued by it. I'm not picking upset. I'm not picking Boise State on an upset. I think Oregon wins. I just think that I think this game is a little bit closer than what the experts think. They got the 19-point spread. I'd take the under on that one. I just think that Boise State, with Ashton Jeanty, they're going to be able to run the football. I feel like they shorten the game a little bit. I don't feel like it's enough to beat Oregon, but I feel like it is enough to keep Oregon from pulling away. I think Oregon's still trying to settle in post Bo Nix. I think they're trying to settle in with Dylan Gabriel, with new addition like Evan Stewart. I think they're trying to settle into that offense. So I feel like it's a great week 2, for a Boise State team to run the football very effectively and be able to shorten the game and make it a little interesting, but make it close. Not win, but make it a little bit closer than the experts think. I think if Oregon wins this game by 10 points, I think somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't know exactly like a score, but 34-24, 33-23, somewhere in that neighborhood, I think would be, something. If I had to put a number on it, that's what I would say. But that's definitely my sleeper game. I am definitely intrigued by that football game moving forward. So, like I said, lots of things coming up. Not exactly a real, big weekend for college football for week 2, but we'll get it kicked back off. Week 3, there's some big marquee matchups that weekend as well. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover today. I think I pissed off everybody I wanted to piss off. If you don't agree with any of my takes because I crapped on your team, I'm sorry. It's the truth. And you'll hear more of it on the next episode of After the Whistle. I'll catch you guys later.